in the various schools of ethical teachings of Musar in the Jewish world. For example, in Slobodka, which was a town in Lithuania, they would focus on Gadlus Ha'adam, on the greatness of a person, that a person should think about how great they are, and that would make them aspire to live up to the greatness that's inherent in them. I remember when I was a little after my bar mitzvah, my grandfather passed away. He was a man who put on tefillin every day, went to minyan every day, and he passed away not too shortly before that, and I was walking Union Turnpike in Glen Oaks, and with my grandmother, should be well, my brother, and the fellow came up to me and he said, "Oh, I heard Joey, I heard you putting on tefillin every day, it's such a big mitzvah." I wasn't. And I said, when I heard that, I said, I better do it. If someone thinks I'm doing this, I better do it. So I heard everybody here puts on tefillin every day. On the other side of the spectrum, in the Musar world, there was the school of Navardik. Navardik looked to humble. It was the school of humility. So, for example, one of the students there, he was a rabbi already and a very accomplished scholar, and he said to his fellow, he said, "I've learned half Shas, half of the Talmud, the whole expanse of the Talmud, half of it I've studied and mastered. It's been done for Gornit. I'm still nothing." So the other one says, "You know what? I learned the whole Shas. I learned the whole Talmud from beginning to end. And it's been done for Gornit. I'm nothing." So then there was someone else who was standing by, and he said, "I haven't learned anything. I don't know anything, and I'm nothing." So then the first one said to the second one, "Look who thinks he's nothing." But really, we develop a relationship with God, and that brings us to that existence of nothingness. I remember sitting in the sukkah also, not far from Union Turnpike in New Hyde Park, sitting in my grandmother's sukkah, and one of the fellows there, he lit up a cigarette, and he said, when you get on fire for the light of God, then your own individual experience disappears of who you are, and you start to have a devotion that's totally for God. And I think there's, in the messages that Moses says in this week's Parshat Reeh, there is that aspect of those two things. We read about the false prophet, laws that just because someone comes along and performs miracles doesn't mean that he's necessarily sent by God. If he says to change the Torah, so then we know it's just a test from God to see, are we really going to follow God, or are we going to be impressed just by miracles? People ask why we don't believe in Christianity. That's the answer, It's just so what? So someone walks on water doesn't make him God, So when we don't even necessarily deny that a miracle could have taken place, but it says in Deuteronomy 13, it says that God will send to test us to see, are we impressed by miracles, or are we going to follow the Torah? If someone comes along and says he wants to change the Torah, then it's not a prophet of God. It's not but in the end, really, ultimately, there have been a lot of good things that have come from Christianity. That the messages of the Torah have spread to the rest of the world. So we're thankful for that. But why we stay and we haven't changed? That's the answer. After that, we have laws of keeping kosher. Now, Deuteronomy is called Deuteronomy. It means the second Torah. It's a repetition of the Torah, meaning whatever there was already until now is often repeated, although in Deuteronomy we also have many new mitzvahs that are not mentioned in earlier parts of the Torah. So, one, though, that we have before is the mitzvah of eating kosher, which we have in Parshat Shmini, in the book of Leviticus, and it's repeated here.
You.
So that, so that message of keeping kosher there in Leviticus says something very interesting. It says that if God spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel in the order to say to them. And one of the masters were Bidchu, who Eli Wiesel called one of the heroes of the Hasidic movement. And I think that's an apt title for the Berditchev Rav. He said that it says in the book of Joel, also in the Bible, it says that when Messiah comes, we'll all be prophets. And so therefore, if we're going to have God speak through our mouths, it says in the Medrash about Moses that he could only nurse from his own mother and not from an Egyptian woman, because, and which is what it says in the Chumash, in Parshat Shmos. So that is an order that because the Midrash says that because whatever the mouth that God's going to speak through cannot derive benefit from an unkosher source. So therefore, keeping kosher, the Berditchev Rav says, is a way to get ready for that day in the future when we're all going to be prophets. That God's going to speak through us, and so therefore, we have to be ready for that. Now, I don't know about you all, but I didn't always keep kosher. So what hope do I have? When Messiah comes, am I going to be left out? Everybody else is going to be speaking prophecy, and I'm going to have to be locked out, be shut out. So I noticed that in the liturgy that appears in certain Sidurim, it's not in most Sidurim, but it appears in certain places, for the third Sabbath meal, there are 3 meals we eat on Shabbos, Shalosh Sudas, we call it, which really means 3 meals, that it says in the merit of eating those 3 meals on Shabbos, we can fix whatever we broke during the week by eating not kosher. So therefore, that means that when we eat on Shabbos, we're fixing whatever we ate not kosher. And if since keeping kosher, as Berditchev Rav Kedushas Levi says, is a preparation for prophecy, so that means that when we're eating on Shabbos, we're making that investment, we're enjoying a nice geschmack, cholent, kugel, something, we're making an investment for prophecy, for when Mashiach comes that we're going to become prophets. And really, God transcends time, so really that means that experience that we have eating and drinking on Shabbos is really an experience of prophecy, because that's what it's going to be. And really, by God, there is no past, present, or future. It's all happening now. So while we eat on Shabbos, we're really experiencing the avoda of Nevuah, as the Sfarim talk about, the service, the work of prophecy. Now, after that, we have the laws of the tithes. Now, among the many tithes that we have, and it says very interesting, the Midrash says that when it says aser to aser, a tithe, ye shall certainly tithe, that the Midrash says aser b'shpil setis asher. That in the merit of tithing, we ourselves become rich. It says b'chol tuah zarecha, whatever is in the field shana shana. So meaning that whatever, let's say, you tithe. Last year you had, 1,000 bushels of wheat, so you tithe 100. So according to some understandings of that, I think it's in the Normal Melech, maybe some Kedushas Levi, I'm not sure. I don't quite remember which say. I think it might even be in both, actually, that whatever you tithe, and it's based in the Medrash, that whatever you tithe that year, that everything what you had for the whole year will be your next year's tithe if you faithfully tithe. And Malachi in the Bible says that's one thing we can test God on. I'll pour onto you blessing till you can't say it's enough. It's too much. You'll say already enough. The idea is, so therefore, if you had that 1,000 this year and you tithe the 100 that you were obligated to tithe, so the next year you'll have 10,000, and what was last year your produce will be your tithe next year. But the Medrash says the opposite. Some people they wind up the other way. They start off with 1,000 and they'll tithe 100, and then they're like, it's too much. I'll tithe only 90 next year, and he wound up only with 900, and then until he 80 next year, he winds up only 800, until he winds up with just 100. And he said, "What happened?" So then a friend of his said, "Oh, look at you. Before this, God said all He wants is the tithe for you to give to the priest, and the rest you can keep for yourself. But now I guess you're a priest because you get the whole because He's letting you keep the tithe." But we hope to have blessings. But really, that passage, although we say this about all the tithe, and even with tithing money, really that in the context there in Deuteronomy, it's talking about the second tithe. The second tithe was a unique tithe that was not just given. It was not given as a donation. Rather, it was a tithe that was eaten in Jerusalem. That you separate this tithe, and you have to go to Jerusalem and either eat it there, or you can sell that, take that amount of money that you would have tithed and buy food there and eat and drink in Jerusalem. And it says, in order that you should fear the Lord your God. So what is this? You're going, you're eating, you're drinking, and it's a service of learning how to be a pious Jew through eating and drinking, enjoying good food, wine and the oil and all kinds of delicious foods that you're buying with the second tithe, or you're eating the second tithe, and it's in order to learn how to be pious. What is that about? That's really why there was a city of Jerusalem. It was a place, and why there is, not to be a city like other cities, it's a place to go and to learn how to fear God. And I think it goes back to what I began with. I remember they told us in yeshiva when I was learning in Jerusalem, they said, you might be a big shot back where you live. You live in a small town, you might be one of the few Jews who knows anything, you might be the only one who could read Hebrew, you might be the only one, you're a big shot. You come to Jerusalem, and you see you're nothing. And that's not a bad thing. That's a way to learn to fear God. Because God said there's not enough room for me and him, someone who's arrogant. It's a humbling experience to come to a place, Jerusalem, to recognize and to experience living together with people who are greater than you, who are more pious than you, who are more learned than you, to realize, to humble yourself. Unfortunately, this week, the Jewish people lost a leader who I remember, I only saw one time, didn't get a chance to talk to him, but I spent the Shabbos there in this little town, Boisbrand, in Canada, about a 40-minute drive from Montreal. It was Rabbi Lowy, who just passed away. He was known as the Tusher Rebbe, came from the city of Tush in Hungary. And this was a man that I remember in Jerusalem hearing that if you want to be guaranteed that if someone's, I remember someone said to me, this is someone that is guaranteed if he prays for you or gives you a blessing, the prayer is guaranteed to come true. This is someone who lives on a level of holiness that we can't imagine. That I remember another rabbi I used to go visit in Jerusalem, eat in his home, and I mentioned that I went and visited Tush. He said, did you shake his hand? Did you kiss his hand? The holiest rabbi in the world. That's what he said. Meaning this rabbi, his own father is a Chassidish Rebbe, and a very holy man. And this was someone everybody looked up to. And it was that experience of seeing something greater and a humbling experience that drew many people from around the world, from all different backgrounds, to go so far away to this town in Canada. And this was a man who himself was humble. Our rabbi in White Lake, Rabbi Fishbane, he said he remembers growing up in Williamsburg, learning in Torah Vadas, and that he would see the Tasher Rebbe would come to go collect money or to get loans for his congregation back in Canada. He didn't go sit. He said, I'll just. He went and worked and was humble. They said that he used to come to Williamsburg at least once a year for Shabbos to be by the Satmar Rebbe, to show who Yortzeit was just the day before he passed away, and to show his humility and devotion to someone he looked up as greater to him. The Satmar Rebbe would always honor the Tasher Rebbe, to daven Musaf, and the Satmar Rebbe would look and admire this man who was younger than him, but who he admired as being a holy man. There was a mutual admiration. See, what could he learn even from someone who was younger than him? This was a Satmar Rebbe who everyone looked up to, was the Rebbe of all the Rebbes, and yet he admired other people and saw what he could get from others. And really that's what it's all about. You know, that's what Judaism is all about. Being humble before God. We're coming to Elul, tonight's Rosh Chodesh Elul already. The Kozenberger Rebbe would always explain, we say the Psalm 27 that we say through the whole month of Elul all the way through into Tishrei, throughout Sukkot, and it says, "Rav hashvalti meis Hashem oisa vake shifti v'beis Hashem choli meichayai la'achsis b'noyim Hashem uvake beichalo." One thing I ask, do I beg from the Lord, do I seek out, sit in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to bask in the pleasantness of the Lord, and to visit His temple. Kozenberger Rav asked, what is this? He's asking 3-4 things. He says, I'm only asking one thing. He says, no, I'm asking Oisa Vakesh. The one thing that he asks is Oisa Vakesh, is this I seek out. To be able to be a seeker, to look for something greater, to aspire for something more, to recognize that God is infinite, so there's always more to grow, there's always more to humble ourselves, but also to see the greatness that God put in us, and to admire that. To recognize that someday we're going to be prophets. To recognize that God could give us all the riches whatever we need. To recognize that there's always something to learn to fear God, that we can always go to Jerusalem, to sit in the house of the Lord, to bask in His holiness, and to be around other people doing the same, to have that fellowship and that experience. It doesn't have to be Jerusalem, it could be wherever we go. And it's an interesting thing, you know, what would happen is that if a person was more wealthy, he would have to spend more time in Jerusalem because he had more tithes. And so because wealth is sometimes a challenge to prevent us from seeing God, and so therefore he needed that extra time in Jerusalem. He had more tithes, he had more what to eat, he had to finish up in Jerusalem. And so too, even if people are spiritually wealthy, they also need that experience of going and being around people who are greater than them, to have that humbling experience, to recognize something. There was very recently an article that interviewed a rabbi who was also a student of the Satmar Rav, who lives here down the road, the next exit over all year, Rabbi Leibowitz, should be well, very great man, very incredible scholar, one of the greatest scholars of our generation, really, and a very special person. He lives here in Woodridge all year long. And they interviewed him and asked, you know, what did you learn there, growing up, being around the Satmar Rebbe, this Yortzeit we just marked this past week with a pilgrimage. And he said, what he learned is to simply be a Jew. You don't need anything fancy. You don't need to belong to any type of party. He said, he said, people talk to the Satmar Hasidim. He said, there's no such thing. As Rabbi Leibowitz said, it was just a town. We had a Rav who taught us to fear God, who taught us the Bible, and taught us the Talmud, and taught us the Midrash, and taught us the Rishonim and Achronim, the earlier rabbis, the medieval rabbis, the post-medieval rabbis, the current rabbis. And he taught us in a simple way, and he taught us everything. He didn't say, oh, this you can't learn, and that you can't learn. there's so much richness in the Torah. Certain communities, they'll say, oh, we don't learn this book because my great-great-grandfather fought with that rabbi, so we can't study that. You know, there was such a story that was one rabbi who was still alive, and he was talking to the Satmar Rebbe, and the Satmar Rebbe said to him, he quoted the Ketsos. He was a great Lithuanian rabbi who wrote on the Code of Jewish Law a commentary. And this other rabbi said his custom is he doesn't learn the Ketsos. He said, Satmar Rebbe, you learn Ketsos? He said, yes, what could I do? He said, I know your great-grandfather wrote a great book, a tremendously holy book, a Bible commentary, a very deep Hasidic Bible commentary. But when I wanted to find an answer in the Code of Jewish Law, I couldn't find it there. But I found it in the Ketsos. You know, certain places. So Rabbi Leibowitz said all these other communities, they're missing out because they can't learn. You know, they belong to this party, to this community that says we only study this, we only study that, and that's it. And he says no. By us, we're just simple Jews who believe in God, who believe in the old ways, and just trying to keep things, nothing fancy, nothing new. And through that, we should have enough inspiration to live lives of holiness, and we can appreciate that and to gain through our devotions and our studies both to recognize God's greatness and to recognize the greatness that He put in us, which is both humbling and inspiring at the same time. And we come at the end of our Parsha, we come to all the holidays, which brings us to true joy, and that represents what will be when Mashiach comes. And the holiday of Sukkot particularly, it says, you should rejoice on your holiday and be only happy, nothing else. We should have only that happiness to recognize all the good gifts that God gives us, which will humble us and give us that way of seeing, that way of experiencing, that way of being humble but also being uplifted, that we can get really wherever we go, but certain places might help us more than others. And let's hope and pray to have, as we start tonight, Rosh Chodesh Elul, and remember to say Ya'aleh V'Yavo, it's Rosh Chodesh, 2 days of Rosh Chodesh. We're going to start blowing the shofar on Sunday. We're going to start hearing that voice, that sound that Maimonides says, Ur Yishedim Yishnaschem, wake up, you sleepy ones. We're all asleep in this world, but now it's time to wake up. Now's that wake-up call, that a New Year's coming. Let's try to fix everything to be good and pious, and that this year should be the year that we're all looking forward to. Hopefully it could happen before then. Hayomim b'kolos ishmo. It could be today if you listen to His voice. But with that or without that, our sages say the Motzei Shvius on the year after the sabbatical year, and we have to remember the sabbatical to have the protocol and everything. We'll talk about that later. The year after the sabbatical year, the Son of David comes. Let's hope it could be Hayom im b'kolos ishmo. It could be today, but if not, we're still waiting, and we can always wait in a simple way to hope and wait, but not give up hope. And in that way, to be worthy to all the blessings we're looking for to Shabbos. Amen.